Great. So, hi everyone. We're back with another interesting session today, and thank you for taking time and joining us on this LinkedIn live session on uh, the topic called "Unlocking Business Value with Observability." So, I'm Nitin, and I'll be your host and moderator, and also a fellow learner. So, today we'll, like the topic says, we'll be diving deep into the topic of observability, what that actually means, why is it important, and of course, how manufacturing organizations and industrial organizations what can they basically achieve using observability. So, to talk about this topic and to sort of shed some light on this, right? So, I have with me our CIO and head of digital IT services, Mr. Pavithran. So, hi, Pavithran. So, Pavithran, just to give you a big quick background, he comes with over 2 decades of experience in IT for the manufacturing space, and having worked with leading OEMs as well as manufacturing organizations as well in the capacity of a CIO and CDO. So, having been on both sides of the table, I think we are in good hands to sort of understand what this topic can really sort of bring importance to. So, so I think before we start with the discussion points, a couple of reminders. So, this session will run for about 30 minutes, and we will, of course, have some time towards the end for Q&A. So, just feel free to drop in your comments on the or your questions in the comment section, and I'll definitely sort of bring them up and read them out to Pavitran to address. Right. So let's start. So firstly, I think let's understand observability, right? So the term itself might sound very simple, but I'm sure there's much more to it. And for people in the industry, I think it's important to really understand what this means and how this actually differs from typical monitoring related activities that a lot of the organizations and folks might do in the industry, right? So I think over to you, Pavitran. So if you can give us some inputs on that.
Thanks, Nitin. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for taking time to join this session. As Nitin set the context, I think next 20 30 minutes we'll be talking about observability and how it is different from monitoring. And probably we'll look at this in different areas, whether it is enterprise environment or plant environment or even in the field environment. Most of the time, we all know enterprise environment is very matured, but how do we deal with that in the other environments too? Because we have infrastructure which is critical in other areas as well. So as all of us know, recently or in the recent past, we see observability is gaining a lot of significance. So, especially due to the complex, distributed, dynamic tech landscape, is driving this, real needs. So, if you see traditionally, right, uh, maybe like pre-cloud era, maybe 10, 12, or 15 years back, most of the applications and servers were there in the data center, on-prem server room. So we had a better control, and we know or we had a very good process in place to maintain these applications, like having couple of windows every month to move the changes to the production, and manage these applications in a proper maintenance window. So everything was very defined, but if you see, like, with the advent of cloud, with the prominence of cloud, software is totally or mostly unlocked from hardware, right? So software need not be, like, very much dependent on hardware. So during 5 10 years back, whenever we used to plan any application, we used to create uh, the capex plan for the hardware, because it always used to go software and hardware together. But today, no, we don't do that. So software has moved from capex to opex model because of cloud, and uh, fortunately or unfortunately, it moved out of CIO office. Right? It is not controlled by CIOs, the software, because of number of SaaS platforms and shadow IT, are democratization of technology. There are many groups, whether it is supply chain team or legal team, anyone going and started availing these technologies. So people are procuring these SaaS platforms and started digitalizing their processes. So with this kind of scenarios, right, the traditional monitoring, where we do monitor for the predefined metrics or predefined alerts, is not enough anymore. So we need to go beyond the traditional monitoring. However, it is a journey. We all understand every application is not observable from day one. It's a journey. It starts with monitoring first, and understand the KPIs. Then you eventually mature over a period of time. So it's a journey, as we all understand. And observability generally gives us a lot of insights. I'll be covering how we are going to achieve that. But when you have complete control, or the holistic view or wide angle view on your applications, right, you will be able to pinpoint where is the problem, and how that can be fixed, and how you can bounce back very quickly. So that's makes everything resilient. And eventually we provide that customer experience to our end users. So that's where observability plays a major role. Just not just monitoring, beyond monitoring, it brings lot of business value to the customers. And also it gives you a transactional view of the existing applications. Generally, the monitoring is more around the black box, but the observability, gives you a lot of insights, uh, and what is happening and why it is happening, how it is happening. Such information is, provided in a holistic way. And when you
Great.
have this data, when you have this data or data driven approach, right, you can minimize, you can use AI ops to minimize, mean time to resolve MTTR, or improve the mean time to failure, the so those things will bring in lot of business value to the customers by making the infrastructure and the systems more reliable. Nitin.
Great, great. I think to if I just summarize some points that you mentioned, right? So, in the current digital world, I think with so much going on, organizations are basically looking for that holistic view, and at the same time, the right source of truth into their entire infrastructure, and ultimately, like you said, the business outcomes are sort of driven by these data insights, leading to resilient operations around like minimizing your MPTR and improving MPTF and things like that, right? So, I think that sets the tone for possibly the next set of points that I had, like in terms of so based on what we've sort of understood, like at least, can you possibly like delve a little more into the what sort of constitutes observability itself, right? Like in terms of what goes into that, and how is it sort of how does it sort of come together?
Yeah. Like, to make any system observable, right, it definitely depends on the technology, and it has got its own, ingredients to make any system observable. And also, we, just discussed, making any system observable in enterprise environment could be simple compared to other environments, like hash environment, like field, where we have field devices. And how do you want to make that field stack or edge stack more observable. That is slightly different from our enterprise environment. So enterprise environment more or less matured, and we have number of tools and vendors who can really help from such angles. So when we move towards the factory environments or the OT environments or the edge stacks or the field environments, the technology stack is slightly different and it is not mature. When you are trying to instrument, this infrastructure or the systems or the application using these tools, or while you are collecting the data using maybe could be open source tools like open telemetry or whatever available and whatever we feel is appropriate for our landscape, there is a lot of challenge, when we are collecting the data and when we are storing this data. And then, once we start collecting the data, and we need to start analyzing the data and making the relevant data available with the in the form of dashboard, so that the users or the end users would be, or the operators would be more proactive in addressing the points or the pain points. So if you see that, it's all data driven, right? So what are the pillars, the key pillars of the observability, like as it is displayed, the metrics and the logging and the tracing. So metrics tells us what is happening at any point of time, right? What is happening, and suppose let's take a simple example of order management application. So if we consider, like, our system is capable of creating 500 orders, but it is only doing creating generating 200 orders, there is a problem with uh, the performance of that application. So metrics tells us what is happening. And traces, like, once we start tracing profiling an application, right, it points us, in that order management application, where is the pain point, what is that latency not allowing this application to create 500 orders, right? So it is only limiting it to 300 orders. So the traces are very critical. And finally, the logs tells us why it is happening, what is that new function moved by the developer the weekend, which is creating that latency, or which is creating that clog in the system. So when you have these metrics, traces, and logs, and when you put that into a context and get a coherent view, right, you will be able to pinpoint any problem, and you will address that problem. You will also see to that that problem will not be repeated in the future. So that is the power of the data. So, and doing this in all the environments might be different. That's where observability is a journey. It has got its own stages, and making a system or any application observable itself is a science, right? So we need to have right partners to do that readiness check, like, how ready our systems are to have this kind of environment, right? Who should have good understanding of IT, OT, the field, and they have experience. So that's what bring in this kind of things possible. And these are all the some of the key ingredients, in my opinion, Nitin. Yeah.
Got it, got it. So I think you probably broke that down very simply for us, like in terms of the pillars. So I think you also mentioned about how observability is a journey, right? It's not something
Yeah.
that you can just think of and it just happens. And so just on that point, right? Uh, so what does that journey actually entail, like in terms of that whole cross-functional environment of different people from OT, IT, different systems coming together? So what does it take to sort of build that uh, observable infrastructure, for example, right? So and when what sort of goes into that? If you can maybe uh, take an example or something and sort of shed light into that, that might be able to we might be able to sort of I think contextualize how this can come about.
Yeah, definitely. As I said, observability is a journey, and we generally starts with the monitoring, right? When we are monitoring any application, it is a black box for us. We look for the application performance or the network performance, how it is responding to us. Generally, it starts with the basic monitoring. But before we really get into the observability or setting up the goals for, generally observability is part of SRE, the reliability, which is a bigger picture, which is very critical for any organization. So we need to be very clear what is that outcome we are looking for, what is that we are trying to achieve as per this observability journey. And we need to be very clear from the milestone point of view. What is that we are trying to achieve and what are the dependencies? And we are not talking about one particular application here. We are talking about a set of applications distributed across the cloud, on-prem, different locations, geographies. So when we are very clear, we need to be clear on the objective, and we need to understand the SLAs from the end customer's point of view. Then we need to start understanding the problems as well. So then we can start creating a roadmap. Okay, it starts with a basic monitoring. Start looking for what is happening, and what are the problems, and uh, what are the different technologies or platforms we have. Maybe if you wanted to start with monitoring, just knock is something like NMS, or start with a knock, and start monitoring those systems utilization, the responsiveness, the CPU utilization, or RAM utilization. These are all the basic things. Once we start setting the stage for monitoring these key parameters, it would build the culture also, because we need to start building that culture around within the organization to see how we start consuming this data. It is not always creating the data, because monitoring is nothing but creating the data, collecting the data. But how do we consume that data and how do we respond to that data is also very important. That's what we need to set up as part of the framework when we are setting up this monitoring in the organization. Then we need to start aiming for the next level. Start seeing what could be the problems, what are, because most of the time in observability we deal with unknown unknowns. So we don't know exactly why it is happening, where it is happening, how it is happening. So we need to keep that reliability, the end goal in mind, and start working backwards. How do we start putting that understanding that failure points, and start looking for the insights around that failure points. So as we discuss this, the key pillars, once we start instrumenting these systems, like once you start collecting the logs, or the traces metrics, you get a lot of insights around that. So you can that naturally takes you to the next level, right? So once you have the data, and once you start consuming the data, you will start moving to the next levels, because you are maturing in the process. You have the framework in place to collect the data, process the data, and consume the data, and even present that data to the necessary management stakeholders. So if you see the example, what is presented now, right? This is definitely very complex environment, right? This is a very harsh environment, and we are talking in the field. We are not talking about a use case or case study in enterprise or in OT space, but it is in the field. So and it is a remote, right? If you see the problem in this particular use case is, like, this is an oil field, oil and gas hash environment. So to really understand the quality of the production, the reliability aspects of this environment, so customers used to send people regular basis to collect the data manually and then process the data. So there is a lot of lag, right? So as we all understand that data is critical, so in this case, like what we have started with is first started having edge stack, where which is allowing us to collect the data from different well pads. So every well pad has multiple oil wells, which are continuously drilling around the clock. So we start collecting the data from these well pads using edge stack. So this edge stack started giving us the information what really needed for us to understand from the operations point of view, operating parameters, at what type of conditions, and how each well is running. So it is purely operational related, not the transactional. We are not talking here much about what each pump is, what is the throughput of each pump, but how the oil pump is operating, oil well is operating. So once you start collecting such data, right, you are getting more information about the way it is running, the way it is operating, and the kind of conditions it has got. And you can also, once you have the data, historical information, you can also start predicting some of the problems because you've already gone through and you have the data in place. So such edge stack will really help us to start monitoring and also to start understanding and move slowly from reactive maintenance to predictive maintenance. And also this has this stack what we have deployed has also got ability to collect the transactional data. As I said, monitoring is purely understanding the predefined metrics. Okay, this pump should have be running 24 hours with this capacity. That is what it is. But from the observability point of view, when you dwell into that, what is the transactional behavior? How is it really performing? The other example also we have taken the order management, right? How many orders it is being created? That is more a transactional behavior of such application. So the same, if you correlate that to this environment, hash environment, what is the throughput? Per day or per hour, how much it should generate, and what are the challenges, what are the different anomalies. Now how do we interpret that with the data our edge stack is providing, right? So as I covered already, making any system observable is not always tool driven, right? If you go with one particular tool in the market and say I'll use this tool across IT, OT, and field environment, it is not possible. So to make a system observable, we need to really understand the context and then understand the reliability, what is from the application point of view what we are trying to achieve, and then start working around it. So as we start getting into the transactional side, what is that throughput, or how that I'm not talking functionally too much, but what is the kind of data we are getting. Then we start creating maybe a dynacard, which would help us to interpret the kind the kind of operations happening under the whole. So with that, we'll be able to understand whether the quality is correct or there are any anomalies, and then it will even give alerts to the right people. So at the end of the day, if you see, the data is playing a major role, and how to collect the data. For that, we need to do right instrumentation. We need to have a right collect data collection, and then we need to have right way to store the data, and then process the data. So when we handle the data correctly in the observable ecosystem or platform, we are improving the application, right, performance. And also we are trying to understand the transactional behavior also. So these things, like will really help the customers, our end customers, to understand the transactional behavior and map that to the business value, right? At the end of the day, the reliability, all those brings in more business value to the customers. So this is one of a very good case study where we have implemented observability using totally different stack, right? Because it's more business value driven and creating value for the customers rather tool driven. That's what Nitin.
Great. I think you summed that up pretty well of how the the concept in terms of the pillars and how it comes together, and with sort of an example that how this can be actually sort of deployed to bring better business decision making, right? So I think we have a couple more minutes, so maybe I have one more question. So in terms of
Yeah.
so, so let's take the this concept of observability itself, right? Like in terms of from a manufacturing and an industrial setup organization standpoint, who are these typical stakeholders who are involved when an organization decides to sort of look at these business outcomes from an observability standpoint, right? So, who are these key decision stakeholders, and what sort of contributions do you think they should sort of look at to bring that whole journey in place?
So maybe if you see, from the SRE, site reliability engineering, though it is, sounds like very specific to application, this, term is, I think, coined by Google. So predominantly observability, monitoring, and all are part of the SRE. SRE generally, not just talks about um, reliability, it also talks about scalability, how quickly we can
Okay.
scale anything, and how reliable our applications can be to the end customers. So most of the places, from the engineering point of view, the SRE teams focus on these areas because now most of the applications are native, cloud native applications. They are, starting or in the cloud and growing in the cloud. So most of the organizations, cloud first application organizations, were driven with the cloud. Pretty much, whether it is in the enterprise level or manufacturing level, they definitely need observability. Without observability, you will not be really able to achieve reliability. So this is an input, right? Because observability makes uh, us to understand the internal state of the overall schema of thing or applications from the external outputs. By looking at the external logs, traces, you will try to understand what's happening internally. So all the business owners definitely indirectly looking for this, and SRE teams enable, facilitate such requirements, especially the cloud are driven, and our example is a hybrid, even the on-prem, everywhere, these kind of people now having a distributed application. So it is imperative to have such solutions so that we'll be able to understand how internal shadow IT resources or anyone using these applications, and how we can make their experience better. Yeah.
Got it. Got it. Awesome. I think we're just on the dot, Pavithran. So I think uh, this was good. I think we covered a lot, and we definitely sort of learned something new today. At least I did. So thank you once again for your insights, and I'm sure we'll have some more topics around your specialization in the area of digital transformation and things around that, right? So until next time, I think we have a couple of interesting topics around OT data harmonization coming up. So I'm sure that will be of real interest for some of our audience. So I'd recommend you to sort of stay tuned and register for those sessions. And so until next time, I think thank you for joining us. Thank you, Pavitran, for your time,
Thank you.
and goodbye. Thank you.